Okay. Welcome back to Chapo, everybody. We're coming to you on Wednesday, January 17th, slightly ahead of time. But we are joined today by two journalists from Hellgate, NYC, Christopher Robbins and Katie Way, to talk about a figure that's become sort of a fixture of the Chapo lore. He is sort of a messianic political figure who I would describe as swag on loan from God. I'm referring, of course, to one of my favorite figures on the American political scene, my own mayor, Eric Adams of New York City. Chris and Katie, you were from Hellgate, NYC, which is a great, great local news outlet and bridge. But the reason we invited you on the show is because you put out basically a compendium of everybody who has ever sat down at Eric Adams' table of success. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, for sure.
Chris and Katie, I want to begin with a quote from Eric Adams that's featured in the Table of Success sort of dossier that you guys have compiled. It's a quote from him that I think sums up the entire mentality of Eric Adams and his administration. He said of himself, quote, "God said, I'm going to take the most broken person and I'm going to elevate him to the place of being mayor of the most powerful city on the globe." How does this sum up like Eric Adams' like self-image and not just that, but like how his response is to like criticisms regarding various corruption scandals surrounding his administration?
So this is, Adams as the sort of as I think you put it earlier, he's like a sort of messianic figure. He positions himself as being a victim to like many slights and lots of unfair criticism, lots of doubters, which is where the phrase "let your haters become your waiters" at the table of success comes from. And, he sort of positions himself as living proof that these people are wrong, that he's supposed to be here. But I mean, he's been a fixture in New York City for a very long time. He started out as an NYPD officer, transit cop. He started a group called 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care. He was like mixing it up as an activist, criticizing the police department. He sort of parlayed that into a seat in the state legislature for a while. Then he ran for Brooklyn Borough president, did that for several years. And then in 2021, he ran for mayor and won.
Yeah, and something Eric Adams likes to say, both about himself and, a lot of the people we're going to talk about today, is that he is perfectly imperfect. And that's kind of his catch-all term for like anything from being convicted of financial crimes to just like not being that good at your job. That's his whole thing, is that he's a diamond in the rough who surrounds himself with diamonds in the rough, to sort of complete the flashy necklace of success around the neck of New York City.
I mean, like another recent example is recently our mayor was asked about anger towards his administration in light of the recent budget cuts that have closed libraries on the weekend. And they asked him, like, how do you respond to that criticism? And he says, I don't, because people have been coming up to me to thank me for cutting the budget. So like he is a guy who finds himself sort of beyond reproach. And also that like, it's just the idea of the hater is very, I mean, Chris, you described it as like doubters or critics, but like, in the Adams administration and many people at the table of success, what marks you as sitting at the table or waiting on the table is whether you are a hater or not.
Yeah. And also just like who is willing, I think, looking at the table of success, which is, as you mentioned, like an interactive sort of feature with around 50 people in Adams's orbit, the one thing that they tend to share is a unflinching loyalty to Eric Adams and like his brand and what he stands for. And yeah, I mean, anyone who doesn't have that sort of same loyalty is not at the table of success and is worthy of your sort of skepticism and distrust. And, it's almost like you don't, because you're skeptical of Eric Adams, you somehow don't want New York City to succeed or whatever. And he sort of bakes that into blunting criticisms of his administration as well.
You mentioned that he's been a fixture in New York City politics for a long time, but like despite being a lifelong resident, Eric Adams really exploded onto my consciousness when he ran for mayor. And the first time I ever really took notice of him was with the release of an old video he made demonstrating how to inspect your child's bedroom for things like pistols, cocaine, knives, bullets. and demonstrating how, as he described it, various popular knapsacks could be used to secrete drugs. How does his experience? Because he's leaning heavily on his experience as a cop. How would you say his experience as a police officer shape his policies and his view of himself and his administration?
Well, I think Eric Adams has said kind of time and again that public safety is a, huge priority for him. And even though when he was actually, a member of the NYPD, he sort of made his bones being, iconoclastic and speaking up against, things like stop and frisk. But now that he's sort of at the seat of power, you kind of find him taking it back to the traditional cop values of looking in your kid's stuff and being really scared.
Yeah, I mean, this is the guy who took out an ad for a billboard that showed two people with sagging pants. Remember the sagging pants epidemic?
Oh, I mean, his crusade against sagging your pants is a big part of his backstory and his book that he wrote, which we'll get into in a second.
Yeah. So I mean, it's he's playing to his audience of older middle class, Brooklynites who see something like people sagging their pants and connect that to the end of civilization. And I think, as Katie said, as a cop, he sort of sees it as his job to point these things out. But, now that person is the mayor, and he still has a lot of that baked into his policy decisions and the things that he chooses to prioritize.
Yeah, I think a good example of that, Chris, is the reporting you've done on all of the times he said that kids in public schools are smoking fentanyl-laced marijuana, which you've had multiple experts say that's literally
that is the least profitable drug operation of all time. I guess that's if Willy Wonka sold weed.
Well, he's if a Dare commercial became mayor of a major American city, because his view of I don't know, the streets and crime, it seems to be that it's everywhere all the time, and we constantly need to be on lookout for it. And I guess that's a good way of segueing into this book he wrote, which has recently come to light in New York City. Could you describe, have you been following the Don't Let It Happen saga and how this has become something of a, I don't know, something that's dogging this administration?
I mean, it's funny because, this book came out in 2009, I believe. So it's been around for so long. It was self-published. It is basically the sort of textual version of that video you described earlier of him searching a kid's bedroom for contraband.
Something as simple as a crack pipe.
Something simple as a crack pipe, a used crack pipe. Could he have found it on the street? That's quite possible. But this is a discussion piece where you should start speaking with him to find out what is he doing with it.
Right, yeah. The cover of the photo is worth describing.
Oh my God. The cover of this book, Don't Let It Happen, is an open lunchbox, and within the lunchbox is a banana, a revolver, and what looks to be an ounce of cocaine.
It's a powerful cover. It's an arresting cover. But yeah, this is a self-published book from 2009. We wrote about it a little bit because his longtime partner, Tracy Collins, wrote the foreword to the book. But reporters have started pulling out snippets of the book, which is uniformly pretty eye-opening. There's a whole taxonomy of drugs. It's like the meme. It's like the iced tea meme from Law and Order, where it's
kids today are calling it,
yeah,
real sick stuff. Yeah, no,
super jinkum, and you're okay, and it's this isn't real. But the thing that we sort of seized on was the AP, an AP reporter last week asked the mayor point blank about one of these anecdotes in which Adams described in the book that he was given a handgun by a friend of his in school, pointed the handgun at a group of his friends and pulled the trigger, not knowing if it was real or not. And the gun went off. And that was the cautionary tale about why kids shouldn't be trusted around firearms. Not that you would even really need to make that point.
Don't give a grade schooler a loaded handgun.
Was there a faction on city council that was let's just see what happens.
Right.
Don't let it
Let's
happen.
just,
No, yes.
hey, let's hand them out, see what happens. Maybe it's good.
Completely unnecessary anecdote. And the mayor answered the question. He was like, no, that never happened. And then when the reporter pressed him and said, no, this is in your book, the administration denied even publishing the book, said it was a ghostwriter. There's a lot of strange things happening there. So yeah, that's the don't let it happen saga that was in the news recently.
I mean, forget the anecdote about firing a gun at school. There's also a lot of great helpful tips and tricks concluded in this book. But like the anecdote about being given a gun and firing at school is like, you think you would have heard about that story if the guy who did that became mayor eventually, like who did a school shooting years ago. And also like, what happened with that? Was he expelled? But like, whether it's the anecdotes about, whether it's the embellished stories about kids smoking fentanyl-laced weed or whatever, he really feels a need to like include himself to embellish the authenticity of these anecdotes that are obviously untrue. And then this is a repeated pattern in his administration. Is it not, Katie? Are there any other examples of this you can think of?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think my favorite is when he said that he carried that photo of that cop that he'd served with, who I think died in the line of duty. And he was like, this is in my wallet every day. And then it came out that he made his staffers
to artificially
make it look
the photo.
old, like you're doing like a map for a school project. Like they had to pour coffee on it or whatever. That's number one to me. That's awesome. Like I just think that's amazing.
Well, like there are so many examples of like this from Eric Adams, and like I find him such a uniquely fascinating character because to me, he is not like identical in terms of his politics, but he is identical as a political figure to me. The only man I can compare him to is Donald Trump, and by that I mean he is a truly only in New York kind of story, like a truly only in New York City could produce someone like this, and I regard him as a horrible mayor, but I find him so uniquely fascinating and funny that like I can't help but admire him in some strange way.
Yeah, I mean, it's also worth noting that 2020 primary election that Adams won was the very first use of ranked choice voting in New York City. So you had a large field of Democratic candidates running for that primary. The turnout was like not great, which it usually isn't in New York City. But like, Adams won. He beat the next closest opponent of his, Catherine Garcia, by not that many votes. I want to say it was around 7,000 votes. Someone should fact check me there. But like, this is to your point, like this is someone who, yes, he was a known political entity, but he wasn't known really to many New Yorkers and obviously the world. Someone who won by like a relatively small margin and is now like in charge of 8.5 million people, has one of the most prominent jobs in American politics, and is just a genuinely interesting, sort of strange kind of guy. And now that he's mayor, we see that every day. It's not like when he was borough president, which is basically like a cheerleader for the boroughs. Every borough has one. Like he would do wacky stuff, like come up with like rat traps that are filled with water that he would like drown a bunch of rats and invite reporters over there.
Or the smart canes. Don't forget about the smart canes.
I want to get to the smart canes. The smart canes are incredible. When I read that, I was like, a smart cane. Is that what I think it is? And the answer is yes, it is exactly.
Yes. Exactly what it's like. Yeah. Did I come up with that? You know what I mean? Like
I just want to return a little bit quickly to his book, Don't Let It Happen. And a review of it, it is it's not a very long book. It is about the length of like the menu at a Greek diner, and it is padded out with a lot of bullet points to like increase the page length. And it's sort of like it's filled with stats. And just an example that one of these stats shared in the book is this is from byline.com. Their summary of the book. Quoting here: most chapters begin with some nice roomy bullet point factoids, such as over 1 million people reported using inhalants to get high in the year 2000. In Pittsburgh, 12% of students are absent each day. So he has a very like apocalyptic view, particularly of youth culture. And like that comes across in the advice section. Here's a handy bit of advice. Malt liquor is considered the bad boy of the beer family. You can visit any store in the inner city and see freezers filled with various bottles of it. A 12-ounce can of malt liquor is twice as potent as the same quantity of beer. So, like, that's helpful advice. You know, if you're looking for beer that's better than regular beer, try malt liquor.
But, like, you know, as a cop who came up in the sort of the like classic broken windows time in New York City in the late 80s, early 90s, you know, when crime is really high, when there was tons of sensationalistic coverage all the time, it's like, you know, that is what he sort of freezes on, is that moment in time, those like weird PSAs. It's kind of like, you know, how like the music you listen to at a certain age is kind of like what you listen to the rest of your life. Only like this is his shtick. And like,
yeah,
it's not going to change really. And we're all sort of wired like this, but he's the mayor.
He's all about playing the hits, I would say.
Right.
And Katie, like, he happens to be mayor at a time when like crime is historically low in New York City. But like, I mean, his attitude about like, you know, kids, you know, like that, like every time you leave your house is just like you're entering this like madhouse, this cauldron of drugs and violence. Just a few more of the bullet points from the Eric Adams book. There are the first of many signs that your loved one may be in a gang is letting everyone know that they are in a gang.
I mean, he's not wrong there.
Yeah.
That's what I would do, you know.
If your car breaks down, Adams advises you to use a cell phone to call for help. If you don't have a phone, he adds, shame on you. They save lives. And then finally, a bit of gun safety here from him. He provides a breakdown of the individual parts of a gun. For example, the trigger. This controls the firing of the gun. It is normally located on the bottom of the gun in what I call the belly area.
And I didn't know that before I read this. So that was actually helpful to me. The gun's tummy.
One last anecdote from the book. Quote, I was attending a conference in New York when a seminar participant sought me out to tell me that each morning her son would bring his own plastic bag of Sweet and Low to the breakfast table, and she would watch him sprinkle it on his cereal. She sent a sample of the sugar to the New York City Police Department for analysis. The department reported back that the substance was not sugar, but PCP. Users of PCP are known to sprinkle it on their food.
Yeah.
So this is what he's fighting as mayor, is like, you know, angel dust spike breakfast cereal.
The kids are getting wet. And, you know, Adams is the umbrella.
But Katie, like I mentioned that the context is that like he's becoming mayor, like, you know, in New York City that's very different in terms of street crime than it was in like the 80s or early 90s. And he comes from the NYPD. But like, how would you characterize his current relationship with what is like, I think, probably one of the most important blocks of power in New York City politics, the police department?
Yeah, I mean, I think Adams has done a good job sort of staffing the upper ranks of the police department with people who are sort of down to comply. Like one of the people that we wrote about in the table is his the second police commissioner during his mayoral term, Edward Caban, who notably replaced the first ever female police commissioner. And that was like a big, you know, historic appointment for him. It's like I think Eric Adams loves a diversity win and loves, you know, to be historic. And so then you get someone who would go up against, you know, longtime Adams allies. Because I think one thing that I, you know, found a lot when working on this is like, this guy has a lot of friends. Eric Adams must be a really good friend because he has found people and kept people in his life throughout the course of his career. And a lot of those people are, you know, high up in the NYPD right now. So I think that's sort of been his management system. Like over and over again, we were seeing names like Jeffrey Madry, Kaz Daughtry, you know, just people who've known the mayor for a really long time.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, you know, that relationship, there's an interesting duality to it because on one hand, he is a cop. He's not slashing the NYPD's budget. He's in fact, I think, recently allocating a little bit more money to the NYPD. You know, he's got their support in that material way. But at the same time, you know, like, he's someone who has displayed a profound distrust for the NYPD because of his previous activism, because NYPD leadership did not trust him back in the 90s and early 2000s. And so that's why you see him installing people loyal to him in the top echelons of the police department. And that's also why you saw his brother, Bernard, you know, he tried to hire his brother, Bernard, to be his like top sort of bodyguard. I think in large part because he didn't trust the NYPD to take care of him. So he was like, yo, that's a job for my brother. Can we pay him, $250,000, and the city was like, absolutely not. But I mean,
but you understand the instinct, right? Because
yes.
I mean, Eric Adams seems like a guy whose head is very much in the clouds, but I don't think one thing you can accuse him of is someone who's not aware of how power works in New York City.
I think that's right. Yeah.
And and the thing is, to compare his relationship with the NYPD to the previous mayor, de Blasio, the NYPD were basically in a state of passive open rebellion against de Blasio. And they wanted him out. And but Eric Adams, as I think you quite rightly point out, even though he comes from them, they don't trust him, and he's not one of them because of his prior activism. And that but I think he's very, as you pointed out, has been very cagey about who he puts in charge of the NYPD, or how he manages that, because I think he knows that he needs to get his people in there, or else they're going to basically assert their own agenda all the time. So that's the only way he's kind of compared to previous mayors. But I want to get into sort of the features of the latest allegations of corruption that surround him. And I guess I want to begin by thinking it's an old story where the mayor of New York City, it kind of doesn't really matter who they are or what they believe. They just sort of exist in one way or the other to serve the real estate lobby. So a certain amount of corruption is baked into all New York City mayors and their administrations. But how would you rate the kind of corruption that we've seen making headlines regarding the Adams administration as compared to previous New York City mayors?
I mean, I think in this sort of modern era, you had Bill de Blasio was under investigation for campaign shenanigans that were kind of arcane. Nothing really came out of it, but no one close to him was indicted. But, Eric Adams, his Department of Buildings commissioner was indicted for doing sloppy corruption schemes, allegedly. And again, that is pretty unprecedented in the past 20 or 30 years. That doesn't really happen. I mean, I think during the Koch era, you had lots of corruption scandals. You had commissioners going down for a variety of reasons. And I'm thinking now of the end of the Koch era. But in terms of the past, Bloomberg, de Blasio, Adams, this is, that in and of itself is pretty unprecedented. And then having, federal prosecutors or federal investigators rather took the mayor's phones, seized the mayor's phones. I think that was seen rightly as a huge move by prosecutors that they had something, or they believed that they had something very serious to sort of investigate. And again, that the feds were not taking Mike Bloomberg's phones. We can criticize Bloomberg and talk about him, but that is something that did not happen. And yeah, I mean, that's how I would. It's and we're 2 years in, right? We're 2 years into Adams's first term, so there's still lots of time for things to unfold.
So, and Katie, but would you say that he is in how much danger would you say he's in from the investigation into his ties to Turkish construction firms?
I don't know that I can answer that necessarily. I don't know enough about how much danger the average relationship with a Turkish construction firm poses. But I mean, again, like Chris said, they're taking the iPads, they're taking his phone. They're actively talking to a lot of people close to him that he either installed because they're close to him. So yeah, I don't know. Chris, you might be able to answer that one better than I can.
Yeah, I mean, it's also worth noting that what we know about, you mentioned Turkish straw donors, what we know about all of this basically boils down to what federal law enforcement sources have fed the New York Times. It could be about something completely different. It could be about something related. We just don't really know. And I think, yeah, if the federal prosecutor in the Southern District didn't have something serious on Adams, I think he's made a really serious strategic blunder here, because again, taking the mayor of New York City's phones in a federal investigation, very big deal, makes the mayor look very bad, harms him personally, politically.
Katie, could you give us some background on who Eric Ulrich is?
Yeah, so like Chris said, he was the mayor's commissioner of buildings. And I mean, we were thinking about adding, honestly, because there are enough people on this table, a little sticker for currently under indictment. And so if I recall correctly, he's wrapped up with the tow truck guys. Is that what it is? Yeah. I didn't do this one. So, it's 50 people. It's a big ass table. But yeah, he got Mets tickets, right? He just various like kind of petty bribery stuff, basically.
Yeah. He got more than $150,000 in stuff, allegedly. And that includes like a nice apartment in the Rockaways and Mets tickets. They weren't season tickets. I don't think they weren't like that nice, and in exchange, like this group of people allegedly asked favors of Eric Ulrich. And, including in one instance, like stopping or including like trying to crack down on a shelter that was across the street from one of these guys' apartment buildings that he owned, like a homeless shelter. Like he was upset that people were coming and going and making all this noise and causing trouble. And so he was like, do something about this, allegedly. And so, allegedly Eric Ulrich did. So I think like last spring, when they were at an unrelated event, the mayor reportedly approached his buildings commissioner and said, watch your phones. And I think people rightly interpret that to mean like, sir, you are under federal investigation and you should be careful about what you do.
He's like he's like the Kansas City underboss in casino, complaining to his mom on the FBI wiretap, gets everything about the Tangiers Hotel and Casino.
Yes,
but
yes.
And, well, I mean, it doesn't stop there. Speaking of casino, because another associate of Eric Ulrich, and I'm going to quote now directly from the Table of Success. Quote, he wrote letters vouching for a Bonanno family associated loan shark for Gambito soldier, old man Willie Pazenzia, who was found guilty of trafficking Eastern European women into New York City strip clubs. Quote, I have known the defendant for the past 7 years, Ulrich wrote of Pienza in 2011, and consider him a personal friend.
Yeah. And I think we also have, we're forgetting another important aspect of his identity, which is children's book author.
Children's book author, yes. I was just about to get to that.
If you're wondering what it would be like if pets could vote, boy does Eric have a book for you.
Yeah, so the mob associated building commissioner of New York City also wrote a children's book titled "If Pets Could Vote." How would they vote? How would they vote? Democrat, Republican? Well, pets like being taken care of, so they like the nanny state. So I think they're Democrats.
Yeah, he also, this is the guy who racked up gambling debts, like a significant amount. So again, to your reference, like him writing a letter of recommendation to someone who's mob connected, like it's really kind of, a lot of these people are like central casting still, and it's endlessly fascinating.
Next up at the Table of Success is a woman named Ingrid Lewis Martin, who is something of an enforcer for the Adams administration. So like Chris or Katie, where does she come from and like what is her relationship to the Adams administration?
This was another one of mine. Ingrid and Eric Adams have known each other for almost 40 years. Ingrid's husband was a cop with Eric Adams. And she's basically been with Eric every single step of the way. So when he was a state senator, she worked for him then. She was the deputy Brooklyn borough president. And now at City Hall, she has a title that she made up herself called chief advisor. And basically, according to the people who work in City Hall and civil servants, like she is the final word. Like she is the hand of the king. Anything Ingrid wants, Ingrid gets. And generally this is translated into like killing street safety projects across the city, including like bus lanes, bike lanes, safety redesigns, like anything that pisses off, people who have to move their cars once or twice a week. Ingrid is there to sort of put the kibosh on what the DOT is trying to do. So that is like what she is kind of known for now. But, she's also like, she also prompted the mayor when he said some of his more alarming things about separation of church and state.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up because like she really seems to be a mouthpiece for, as I said, the kind of messianic vision of the Adams administration. And keep in mind, like this is someone speaking for the mayor of New York City. And she said, quote, we know in government many times it is said that one has to separate church from state, but we have an administration that doesn't believe that. We have a mayor who you'll hear from shortly who is definitely one of the chosen. So that's what I mean, like the mayor of New York City describing city politics in such directly like Christian and God infused language is very odd. I mean, you wouldn't think that would happen, but like, yeah, where does this religious calling come from?
I mean, a huge part of the mayor's base are Black middle class folks in Brooklyn, church going people. Like, when Adam says things like that, or when his staff says things like that, that is who he's talking to. And that message is like pretty well received. And, Adams, again, like he sort of ties this into this idea that like, he is a put upon figure. He's going to be criticized in the press. Like, all of that is just noise. He is going to continue to do his job, which has been like anointed by God himself.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, and
it's like if Pontius Pilate converted to Christianity and then started talking about all the haters at the temple. Like that's kind of how I conceive of the Adams administration. But there's another anecdote. There's a great anecdote about Ingrid Lewis Martin. Could you describe like this as a way of like her flexing her power? Could one of you describe the dentist appointment Zoom call that she managed to pull off?
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, if you want to take this one, that's totally fine. No,
take it away.
Basically, big meeting, big Zoom call. There's senators on there. There's lots of high ups, and as one does, Ingrid has her screen off for a while. She's sort of delaying the start of the meeting. She cuts the camera on, and she is fully in the dentist chair as they are working on her teeth. She says, "Sorry, I'm at the dentist's office," which is nice and polite of her to say. But then from there, she's basically like, yeah, we're going to table this. We're going to get back to it later, and ends the call for everyone.
Like ultimate power move.
Yeah. That's baller, to be honest.
Like they're scraping plaque off your gums and you're just like, hold on one second. I gotta zoom into this call real quick. Like, like they got this suction thing in the corner of your mouth that's being picked up on your microphone. Yeah, that is in the post-COVID, like post-office world, like the ability to zoom in from a dentist chair is a sign of true dominance.
It's like dentist, colonoscopy, what else? Like what are the most like embarrassing personal situations you could put yourself in and then force other people to live through? Yeah. Just incredible.
All right. Moving on now to the woman who wrote the introduction to Don't Let It Happen, Tracy Collins. Well, here's the question. Tracy Collins is described as Mayor Adams' longtime girlfriend. But I think the most important question here is to ask, is Eric Adams, does he have a girlfriend? Is he single? Because you mentioned that in an interview on Hot 97 earlier this year, he said he was single, but in a real relationship. So what is going on with our mayor's relationship status?
I mean, not to say anything about Eric Adams specifically, but I've heard from a few prominent New York publications that polyamory is pretty hot right now. So, it's in the air.
Everyone's doing it in New York.
Everyone's poly these days.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Eric Adams is affiliated with, I think a lot of different women at the table are people that Eric Adams has cohabitated with. So that's again, not to say.
Yeah,
much.
I mean, it's that Hot 97 interview. You can kind of hear, if you listen to it, you can hear Funk Flex sort of like the gears in his brain, like process, like what is going on.
He's hovering over dropping a bomb. His hand is just on the sample board.
Yeah. He's like, what? But I think literally, the mayor might mean that his marital status is single, but he's in a relationship. But as Katie just said, what that means practically speaking is that, yes, he's been in a long-term relationship with Tracy Collins, but he's also been linked to another member of the table who owns a piece of property in the same building in Fort Lee, New Jersey, as Tracy and Eric. There's another person at the table who works for the NYPD currently.
She's like the HR head, and he was her roommate, when he was borough president.
They lived together in Brooklyn for a while. So and the mayor is famously, he says New York City is a place of nightlife. I'm out there to test the product. He's hanging out late night.
Oh yeah,
in different places all over the city.
Outdoor dining. You see someone sexy.
He's a social butterfly.
Get out of your car. Yeah.
No, like he is like the stereotypical old guy at the club, and like this is the thing I find endearing about Eric Adams. And again, indeed, one of the success table members is the owner of a private club very much beloved by the mayor called Zerobond, who was appointed to the Met board. Could you talk a little bit about the owner of Zerobond, how he got appointed to the Met board, and what are some of the things on this guy's resume are great?
Yeah, I mean, so all right, so Zerobond is this, to me, extremely cheesy private club downtown in NoHo. The address is Zerobond. It's, the membership fees are like in the thousands, tens of thousands of dollars. There's a room that like requires a fingerprint scan to hang out in. So like it's extremely exclusive, but also extremely corny, and this guy, Scott Sartiano, who used to run that club, One Oak, this is a club he started. The mayor started hanging out here a few years ago. It's unclear like who first introduced him to the club. It might have been this sort of Trump world guy, Ron Tarosian, who's this PR person who no longer has a relationship with the mayor. Regardless, the mayor had his like victory party in 2021 there. He's known to sort of just pop in, at all hours of the night. And I think, why is this guy on the Met board? I think because, we don't know for sure, but probably because they were hanging out at Zerobond one night and he was like, that'd be cool if I was on the Met board. And the mayor was like, sure. Like, his resume is great because,
I mean, it's undeniable, his qualifications, if you take a look at it.
It's a form. It's like, it's not what I would advise people entering the workforce, especially with respect to getting on the Met board. It's not how I would write a resume. In fact,
2 pages, 5
he
fonts.
misspells the mayor's name. I think there's like
Eric Adams. He misspells Eric Adams.
He misspells Eric Adams. There's a whole bracket.
Wait,
where
it's spelled with a K, like he's a Viking or something.
No, it's rough. It's a perfunctory document, and I think that's what was amusing when we filed a Freedom of Information Law request that we had to sue the city for to get this stuff. By the way, I mean this is the stuff they don't want the public to see, and it's not even like it's that big of a deal, just like show us the resume. But yeah, like it's. And if I can say, if you appreciate this sort of reporting, you should subscribe to Hellgate, because, reporting and lawsuits and all that stuff costs money. And we very much appreciate our subscribers being able to sue the mayor for the weird resumes that he has received. Yeah. But the Zerobond thing is cheesy and baffling.
Yeah, like, because, this isn't much of a scandal to me. Like, I don't really care who gets to sit on the board of the Met or whatever. I mean, it's all make work jobs for rich people. So, like, the fact that, like, the guy who owns a club that the mayor likes can get on there, I think is kind of cool. I mean, that's what I would do if I was mayor.
Yeah.
Moving on, probably the best name on this list is a woman named Tiffany Raspberry. Where do you even begin here? Just the name, her work history. What does Tiffany Raspberry do for the Adams administration?
She's another sort of Ingrid-like figure. Has a history of working, alongside the mayor. I think, again, like sources told us that she pretty much hears complaints from constituents who tend to be wealthier and more powerful, and she then goes into city agencies and executes those wishes. I also think it's notable that she was a former tobacco lobbyist. She lobbied against legislation that would ban menthol cigarettes. Again, just someone with like deep ties to business that is now helping to set city policy in ways that like career bureaucrats or like civil servants in various agencies who are literally just trying to like, build a park or fix a road or, do the boring yet extremely vital work of city government are like, who is this person? Who is Tiffany Raspberry? Why is she telling me to stop doing the thing that I'm doing? And that's kind of her bag. Yeah.
And I think it's a pattern with a lot of these sort of like Adams appointees and these high up positions, either like directly in City Hall or just in various agencies across the city, where you'll have people be like, I don't get why this person is my boss. They don't know what's going on. They're actively bad at their job. But like Raspberry, for instance, her mother worked in the same police precinct as Eric Adams. So it's like it's a way back sort of like family ties situation. And sort of to go back to Scott Sartiano, it's you see a lot of jobs that people clearly applied for knowing they already had them. And so I think you see a quality of work and a quality of application that you do if it's like, oh yeah, it's my friends, it's my mom's friend's dad, like, you know, it's my mom's friend who's going to give me this job, or it's oh, you know, I've known this guy since like forever. We used to party together, and like now I'm making hundreds of thousands of dollars from the city.
The next thing I want to get to is obviously Mayor Adams was a huge booster of crypto early in his administration. And I remember he said he was going to take his first paycheck in crypto right as it crashed and like cost himself about 14 grand off his first paycheck. But like, we're seeing reports in of like his legal defense fund is being flooded with cash right now from a lot of very dubious crypto influenced and very, very shady individuals regarding but like, how is the Adams administration like metabolized the complete collapse of crypto, and conversely, how have they moved on to legalize gambling, which is really just, you know, another name for what crypto was to begin with?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, one of Adams's strengths is that because he just throws so much at you, something like I'm taking my first 2 paychecks in crypto is like a crazy story. But like, if it doesn't get mentioned over a period of months or years, it's sort of just like whatever. So like, you know, there's like 30 other things going on in his life right now that he can sort of react to or whatever. And like, that's like whatever, you know what I mean? In terms of like the casino thing, you know, it's interesting that like Adams is sort of, when Adams was in the state Senate back in 2010, you know, New York was trying to legalize more gambling. I don't know if you've ever been to the Racino out in Queens, the Aqueduct Racino.
Sure.
Deeply sad. I mean, I'm someone who enjoys casinos, and this is like extremely, it's bleak. It's bleak as hell. There's people like yelling at each other, and it's a mess. And, you know, as the contract for that Racino was being sort of bidded for, Adams had like a crucial role in that, in like choosing who would eventually develop that casino. There was this huge report that came out from the state inspector general that criticized Adams, said that he was using like extremely poor judgment because he took donations from the casino developer that ended up winning that bid. He went to a victory party that they threw. That whole bid ended up collapsing under all the corruption that was being alleged. A different casino operator got the license, which opened the casino that exists today. But it's worth noting that like this was one of like the bigger scandals that Adams weathered earlier on in his political career. Fast forward to 2024, and it's kind of deja vu. You have all these real estate companies vying for a casino license in New York City. You have Eric Adams being one of the crucial decision makers as to like who is going to get a license, where the casino is going to go. And there's so much money sloshing around.
Like the idea that we would build a casino in New York City, like outside because I remember growing up, there was like off-track betting, and there was sort of like, you know, state-sponsored gambling parlors for horse racing and like the New York Racing Authority. But like, you know, I've seen recent plans for like a proposed casino next to the United Nations building. Where does it, like, why does New York City need legalized gambling? Isn't this something that like greatly economically distressed municipalities have to turn to gin up a tax base? Like, why does New York City need legalized gambling?
Because the governor has decided that because this was decided years ago by Andrew Cuomo and the legislature, but because the governor has specifically said like this is how we're going to fund a huge part of transportation now. We're going to open some casinos. And to your point, like every new casino that opens up in New York just hurts the other casinos around it. So you're just robbing the other casinos of revenue, moving that money around. And you're immiserating a part of the population just by having a casino there. Like they are the only person who comes out ahead at a casino is the house. Like it's the biggest cliche in the world. So like, yes, why is New York doing this and not coming up with like a way to tax its many billionaires? Great question. But whatever, Times Square casino, baby, Jay-Z, or like Ferris wheel next to my casino, or like Mets casino, like 2024. Let's do this. You know, it's like it's the monorail discussion.
Like a residency for Mr. Met performing every night.
Meet the Mets.
But no, well, you mentioned Jay-Z, and now we get to like someone at the table of success that like other people have heard of, because like he's probably the biggest name. What, like, how does Jay-Z fit into the mayor's plans, and specifically legalized gambling?
Well, I think one thing we know about, not even to speak to the gambling part, but one thing we know about Eric Adams is that guy loves famous people.
Oh, yeah.
So the chance to rub elbows, with someone like Jay-Z, with KRS-One, with P. Diddy, with Robert De Niro, anybody like that, I think is always going to be, catnip to a guy who thinks of himself as extremely cool and who finds it very important that everyone else thinks that he's very cool.
I mean, if there's one figure more emblematic of everything shitty about New York City over the last 15 years, it's Jay-Z's post-Black album comeback. Because, I mean, like, a guy who's went from being the king of New York to, like, the Prince Charles of New York, just by, like, continuing to make music and hang out with people like Eric Adams and Obama.
Yeah, I mean, Eric Adams, who uses Jay-Z's Empire State of Mind literally every single press conference at the walk-up.
That's the worst crime he's ever done.
I love that, though, because, like, most of what the mayor does is, like, make announcements where they're like, we're giving out the award for the guy who, like, killed the most rats out of the MTA, like, rat killing tournament. But before he goes out, he has someone, like, play that song on like, a JBL pillbox.
Yes. That's someone's job. They get health insurance for clicking play on that, little clip every time he comes out. Yeah. And Jay-Z created a crypto academy, like for the Marcy houses over the past few years.
Oh God.
But no, he's involved with the Times Square casino bid that is being pushed by the big real estate company, SL Green. Rock Nation is like partnering with them to build a casino in Times Square. And, again, this is like, if you're Eric Adams, you're looking around the city and you're like, which of these casinos should I like endorse? Times Square casino with Jay-Z looks pretty cool. Like you could hang out there and undoubtedly there'll be other famous people around. And
I mean, Times Square casino with Jay-Z are $1 million. Gotta ask. And also snagged his artistic son an awesome internship. That's a big one.
I did want to talk about the mayor's son, Jordan Coleman, who when you saw a comment from him about why he was recently seen at a San Francisco banquet with a top mayoral staffer and a Chinatown businessman. What was the mayor's son's response to you based on that inquiry?
If I remember, he said that he didn't know that other cities had Chinatowns, and he was working on a movie about Chinatown. So he was like, "I gotta see."
Well,
yeah,
Katie, I got news for Jordan. Someone already made that movie, and it's quite well known.
Yeah, like that. It's like our colleague Adlin conducted this interview, and it's like, yeah, he said, I'm working on a narrative film about the history of Chinatown and its relationship with New York City. After doing research, I realized there were multiple Chinatowns throughout the country.
So he went to San Francisco, probably the most famous Chinatown in America, and he's just like, what? Can you believe this? What?
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, like it's almost kind of endearing, that answer.
Yes. Well, I remember Jordan becoming a part of the election because, like, became the question of was he living at his son's house or was his son's house in Brooklyn actually his house? And like, there were a lot of indications that it was indeed his son's apartment.
Yeah, like Eric
like
Adams,
all the shoes,
right? It's like, yes, of course I sleep in this bed next to a bunch of sneakers that 20-year-olds wear, of course.
Yeah.
And like this salmon in the fridge, this food in the fridge is definitely mine. Famous vegan. Eric Adams, right? It's weird. Jordan was also in this like Albanian. I think it was in this Albanian like version of American Idol rapping. It's a deeply strange, entertaining video. I recommend everyone check it out. I'm still using 10%. I'm learning how to mastermind. Living out a movie. The director is a mastermind. But again, it's just like he's kind of like his dad in that. He's all over the place and has many interests, but he also doesn't have a great relationship with his dad. And he said this in various interviews. So Yeah, fascinating person, Jordan Coleman.
Right. I think he said that Eric Adams was he thought of him as more of his like metaphorical father growing up, which is
wow,
poignant stuff. Yeah.
I had more of an allegory than a dad growing up.
Right. Yeah.
All right. And Katie, you mentioned that he did get an internship with Jay-Z.
Oh yeah, I mean, he got an internship with Jay-Z. He worked at
okay, well, if that's a dad. If he gets you an internship with Jay-Z, I don't think that's a metaphor anymore.
That's true.
I just want to correct the record. He was not an intern. He was an intern at the Late Show with Stephen Colbert. He was a creative coordinator for Rock Nation. So he was on the payroll, a legit job for Rock Nation. He was also the voice of Tyrone the Moose in the Backyardigans, which is a reference that I don't understand because I'm pushing 40. But like for, I guess, people of a certain age, that means something. Again, just an incredible resume.
The next person, the last guy I want to get to at the table of success is currently the deputy mayor for public safety, a man named Philip Banks III, who is also an unindicted co-conspirator in a federal corruption case that used photos of a junket trip to Israel as evidence in this case. And now, like, one of the other, like, again, all relating back to this messianic vision of Eric Adams, he's got ties to Turkey, but like, obviously, like any mayor of New York City is going to be a big Israel supporter. But the things Eric Adams has said about how he identifies with Israel and, for instance, wants to move to the Golan Heights when he retires. What can we say about Philip Banks III's trip to Israel and the federal indictment he's under for it, and as well as Eric Adams' sort of, I don't know, a religious affinity for the state of Israel?
I mean, you can just look at the photos, and all you can say about this trip is best trip ever.
Yeah. No, he was having a great fucking time. Like,
yeah.
Multiple stogies. Yeah.
Sit in a plane, shoot guns, go in the Dead Sea. Like,
it's like him and Draymond Green are having a lot of fun. Yeah, floating and shooting sniper rifles.
No, I mean, Philip Banks ended up there because these two businessmen who were like using him to curry favor within the department had taken him on this trip. They were also flying other cops around on planes with sex workers on them. They were convicted at their trials. Philip Banks was never named as an official defendant. He was never charged with anything. He also said he would plead the fifth, if he were called to testify. So he was an unindicted co-conspirator here. This is someone who has, goes back with Eric Adams a long time. He's in charge of the fire department, police department, and the correction department. Like, that is his portfolio at City Hall. Extremely powerful.
And there's a long history of these kind of like fun junkets, you might call them, these all expenses paid trips to Israel that like further enmeshes the Israeli security state and the American one. And like they pull out all the stops for like U.S. law enforcement bodies and the individuals who comprise them. Yeah,
I don't know if the NYPD still has a bureau in like Tel Aviv, but
it does.
They did. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's like Governor Hochul has taken similar trips.
She took a trip to Israel when her dad was dying in the hospital the other month. Like she visited Tel Aviv she literally let her dad die alone so she could visit Tel Aviv post October 7th. That's our governor of New York.
Yeah. So like, for Eric Adams, it's very much like political. For Phil Banks, this is just pure fun, baby. Like, look at these photos. Like, there's no other way to describe it.
So like I was like that's just but a fraction of a glimpse inside like the universe of Eric Adams. But as we wrap it up here, I just want to like get your guys' take on like, okay, Adams is up for re-election in 2025, correct? Next year. What is the state of like any possible primary challenge to him or his re-election? Is there? I mean, like, you'd think this would be a layup for like because he's like not very popular. He is a bit of a bozo, but like it is a testament to how fucked up New York City politics are that I have not heard a single thing about any primary challenge to Eric Adams. So like, how does he stand in terms of a primary challenge and his re-election next year?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something we've been discussing, especially in terms of, just kind of seeing what feels like people who should be naturally primed to make this challenge to Adams just like totally asleep at the wheel. Like, if this is the time that, you should be sort of kicking this guy while he's down. He's crazy unpopular. I think in the history of all the polling they've ever done about, who likes the mayor, he is, at the bottom all time. And yet these figures who've been ostensibly in, the forefront of at least like recent New York City politics, like a Jumaane Williams or something like that, you're not, instead they're treating the mayor like when your dog is dying and you let it have a hamburger, everyone is they're being really nice to him. And so that's definitely, something that we're wondering as well.
Yeah. Like, this is, I will say the investigation, as long as it goes on, will make it easier for people to challenge him. But, incumbents enjoy they're on the throne. It's hard to knock them off. And I think all the usual challengers, as Katie pointed out, they're very much like waiting to see how this pans out. Like an Eric Adams who beats the charges or has no real charges to sort of answer to emerges a much stronger, more strident, defiant Eric Adams. Whereas an Eric Adams who is indicted and spends, a lot of his time answering questions and having the energy sapped out of him, and business leaders and real estate leaders looking at him and be like, do we really want to stick with this person? I think that is a weakened Eric Adams, and that is one that you'll see people sort of want to challenge. But right now, everyone's sort of just like, let's see how this investigation pans out, and we can dip our toes in afterwards or not. I don't know.
Felix, do you have anything any final thoughts or any questions?
I don't know. Do we have any more turkey related things to look forward to with Eric?
I mean, for New Yorkers who enjoy this content, I hope so. But I mean, yeah, probably. Like, there's no, again, we've just scratched the surface of, like, no one really knows where this investigation is going. If the turkey straw donor thing and the building, like the asking for favors of the buildings department to like inspect buildings or whatever, if that's it, then Eric Adams will prevail and he will win re-election. But if the prosecutor has more than that, which again, the actions of seizing his phones and devices seem to suggest that he does, then there's probably a good chance that we will be hearing more from the mayor's Turkish donors and people in the campaign finance realm.
And I guess that's the other thing about the table, dare I say it's a quote unquote living document. Like, these are
That's right.
By no means, this is not everybody who is enjoying their meal at Eric
Just like our
table.
US Constitution, it is a living, breathing document. The table of success.
I know, I'm a table of success originalist. It is fixed. It's like the tablets handed down to Moses. Christopher Robbins, Katie Way, I want to thank you so much for joining. And I would like to underscore the plug to subscribe to Hellgate NYC. It is a really great local news source in a time of moribund local news coverage. Hellgate is doing great work. And so please check out Hellgate and the Table of Success. Once again, Christopher Robbins and Katie Way, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you all so much. We love Chapo.
Yeah, fun.
All right. Cheers, everybody. Bye.